Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, we don't really need a motion, but yeah, so,
And I'll just go back to the first billing after after the house fire, and we'll go from there. Okay.
all right.
Good.
Sounds good. So E2, we want to maybe wait on so they have time to get here, or what are you thinking?
Mayor, if we could skip that item, that would be great.
Okay. They were planning on coming, huh?
They were planning on coming to give a presentation, so if we could hold off on that.
Okay, and we can let the minutes show that Councilman Merrill is here at 5:04. So we're going to move on to E3 then, or well, do you want to move on? Jerry, you ready, or you want to wait, do you think, or? Okay, all right. E3, amending Chapter 245, peddlers, solicitors, transient merchants, and mobile food units.
Thank you. So Mayor and Council, we did have a discussion, a little bit at COW, but more at Council when we amended our fee schedule to remove mobile food unit license information, or license fees for all of them, the daily, and then the 6-month, and then the annual. So there was discussion to bring back that city chapter 245 to discuss that section and possibly make amendments to what we require them to fill out in their application. Staff would like to know, and we've made some modifications based off the feedback of council at that meeting, which you see before you in red line. But staff is looking for direction on exactly what you would like included in that application.
So I think with this, we already pulled the fees out, so you don't have to pay any fees to operate a food truck in the city now, right?
Correct, that's
And-
already passed.
Okay, and did we just do an annual license then, since there's no difference in the, so that makes it,
So we didn't, they still could have a daily,
but there's no fee,
but there's no
so-
point because there's no
yeah.
fee.
Right,
So,
okay.
I have a question on the insurance part of it, 245-14. At the beginning, it says commercial general liability insurance has to be in the City of Iceni's name or as a co-insurer. Who does that, who would that affect? Is that for the events like the street dances and the rodeo, or?
that's for any food truck unit that would be on city property. So if
Okay.
someone, let's just say, someone ran into them and they were parked on the street, someone ran into them as part of the event or something that was damaged, then we know that they're fully insured to cover that. They're not going to be listing the city, or the person who hit the food truck knows that there was adequate coverage. And so the intent is for the city to not be liable.
I don't believe it's clarified. Should we clarify that? Say any food truck or mobile unit on city property? Or,
Yeah, if it's not on city property, we don't have to have number 3, which would be listing the city of Isani as the additionally insured, unless that even if there was a food truck that, let's say, someone got food poisoning and they wanted to sue, the person who got the poisoning wanted to sue the city because we permitted that food truck to be there, that would help us be covered through their insurance and not be on our insurance.
sure.
But not to say that the likelihood of that is high, but I do think the guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust is to always be listed as the additional insured to have that coverage.
I mean, that just seems,
Is it-
yeah, like it's,
Confusing though.
I mean, if I have a truck parked on the side of the road on the, on the curb, I mean, if somebody hits me or we get in an accident, I mean, the city would never be held accountable for something like that. I mean, I don't know, just allowing vehicles to use our roadways to conduct whatever, I guess, I mean, that doesn't,
I think because we're giving the license,
Yeah,
we're
I mean-
permitting it to be there.
I guess, yeah.
I think if they're just parked
Which
on
I
the
had,
side of the road,
when we
no.
talked before, we talk about just completely, like, we've simplified the license process here a ton, there's no background check unless you're operating an ice cream truck, but did we talk about just removing the license altogether?
I think there was a brief discussion because there was a city that when we were doing research that
Forest Lake, I
doesn't,
think,
and they do a
doesn't require
registration
anything. Yeah.
just to know where they are.
Right.
But not actually do a license permit.
So, I mean, if they're doing that, they're not gonna check to see if there's an additional insured for the city or something like that on there, you know
I
what I
don't
mean?
believe, I guess I'm not
But-
exactly sure. I think it was the city of Blaine that went from a licensure just to a registration. And I don't think it was very in-depth of what they were requiring. It was a very simple form, and I imagine the reason why they do that is just to ensure where the location is not on someone else's property, perhaps, because it
Yeah.
really was very short and brief what they required.
But, I mean, it's not a huge deal to ask to get a certificate with them named as additional insurer, but it's just one more step, and especially when you're operating in multiple cities, I mean,
Takes time.
it's, you know,
What if-
it's a 10-minute email and a 10, you know, I mean, probably just a phone call to your agent, but I mean, you gotta wait for it to come, and the agent's gotta do it, and then if you're trying to get going and working on stuff, I mean, it's just,
Ms. Strand did mention that Prior Lake does registration, not licensing, and they do require insurance. So I guess there's both ways.
What if we were to not do the licensure through the city? Wouldn't you think that would release us of liability if we just had a registration versus a license that we gave out?
I mean, Prior Lake didn't think so, but that doesn't mean that I don't know. It's probably one of those things that's never probably gonna come up. You know what I mean? In
Even
real-
if it did, what's the
in
chance
real- in
insurance
real
is
life,
actually gonna
but-
wanna cover it? That's the thing with insurance, they always find a way to get out of it either way, so.
If a food truck is coming up to go to one of the restaurants or the Thunder Brothers, for example, and would this be confusing to them? Would they think that they would need to put the city of Isani as a binder for their insurance? If they're
It-
reading this and not calling and asking questions?
Well, see, I don't think they would have to if they're on private property, right?
If they're
But
part
so,
of their
but we don't
event.
clarify that here.
It
So
doesn't- it
so
isn't
maybe the easiest
clarified.
solution to this is just add, you know, something as long as, if you're on private property, it's not required. Unless, you know, just to the end of line 3, provide certificate of insurance.
And then if you're on
Additional
private-
insured and provide a certificate of insurance. I mean, I think if unless located on private property.
Or we could just change the title, say, insurance required if on public property.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, that would work too, yeah. Because otherwise, then we're basically just saying that that private property owner, just like if it was a, you know, a farmer's market or a special event,
on
that
them.
it's on them to verify
They need
insurance
to,
and,
correct.
right, so. But, I mean, we very rarely do we have anybody operate a food truck not on private property even,
Right.
within the city. It's almost always on,
And most people just provide the liability the way it
Yeah.
is, so. it
Yeah.
just
Well, I was
becomes thing.
thinking more of Thunder Brothers, food truck backs out on them in the last minute, and they call another food truck, see if they can come up, and they look at our ordinance real quick and say, I'm not gonna be able to get that done in time.
yeah. Well, and I think the licensing on this, I saw something about 10 days, and I'm trying to remember now where, that was on the peddlers and transient merchants, I think, that wasn't on the food truck side, right?
Yeah, 245-5 applications
Yeah.
at 10 working days.
But that doesn't apply to the food trucks.
And that's,
Correct.
that's for the background check, so
Right.
we have enough time for that.
That's right. All right, any other thoughts on the other areas of that? I had one on, kind of back to, sort of similar to what you were saying, George, 24521 on hours of operation. I mean, if they're on city property, I think, you know, 10 PM is the time we close our city parks, so I'm okay with that if they're on city property. But if you're on private property, I think you should set your own hours. So I guess I would like to add something there, hours of operation on city property, maybe to the title of that section too.
Agreed.
Okay. What do you guys think?
Yeah, but are the food trucks done at the street dance? They're going
Well, there's
past 10
exceptions for
o'clock.
special events in there, yeah.
We shouldn't be doing one thing for the city and another thing for,
Well,
The special events aren't just for the city, like anyone can take out a special event permit.
okay, completely different.
Correct.
Right,
or the
so,
rodeo where you're operating until 1 AM or,
so
you know.
street dance considered a special event. This is
Correct.
just for,
Yeah,
If they
right,
want to be registered or a license.
right.
yeah, we need to change the hours to midnight anyway, minimum, or no hours.
Yeah, I would just say if it's on city I mean, you could just say hours of operation on city property outside of special events, but I mean, that other section kind of already covers the special events part, so I don't know if you'd need that, but.
And our sound ordinance would cover that for any, so if someone is being really loud at 11 PM on private property, our sound ordinance would still cover that, correct?
Correct. Nuisance on chapter 216.
Okay.
The other part I thought, and I don't know, it doesn't hurt to have it there probably, but 24522 for water supply, that's already gonna be required by the state, so I don't know if we have to
I think
put
this
it there,
was
but it's fine
based
to
on the
have it.
recommendation of the other food unit
Okay.
person who was here recommending that because she's, I believe, I don't want to speak for her, but she had seen some vendors who didn't have that. And even though it's required of the state, then we have it in our ordinance that, because we don't double check what they're, if they get the state license, that's all we look for in the state. But if it's in our ordinance, we can say you need to have that with us as well.
Okay, I'm okay with that,
That's
though.
why we added that.
That's fine. So basically, what it looks like we're accomplishing is we've already taken the fees out, we've removed the background check, except on ice cream trucks that are going into neighborhoods, and we've made the license really, really basic and gone to just an annual license, and made some other things a little bit easier and more flexible, too.
Can I just have clarity? Are we licensing it or
I'm
registering?
okay with, yeah, well,
I just want
I
clarity,
mean,
so
it's
we're
like
all on the
4
same-
questions on the license form now compared to
Right.
more questions and a background check and insurance verification, and so, I mean, it's much, much easier than it is. I don't know, does it really matter, do you think, if we call it a license or registration?
I think that if we are permitting them to be somewhere, then it should be a license. If we
Okay.
are letting them be there, but we want to know that they're there, then it's a registration. That's how
I'd rather see the registration. I think
Registration would kind of give us a little bit more of a,
Yes.
length from it in
an
case
out
something
if-
happens.
yeah.
no, license would.
Wouldn't license make us, hold us accountable? If they were to license through us, it's, someone could say, hey, the city of Isani approved this. But if they were to just register, we approved it, but it's not like we went through a licensing process. We didn't really give them,
Yeah, but on the flip side, if we wanted to say, well, you can't be here, we've had complaints, you need to be gone, we can pull your license and PD can do what they do as
Okay.
part of the violation of this chapter. If we're registering them, I think that is more difficult to do.
Oh, and I get, there is language here too, that if they were to commit a crime during the license period, that they would, so I mean, a registration probably wouldn't give you the ability to maybe hold them accountable on some of those things too, so.
Okay.
License is probably fine, yeah, what do you guys think?
Yep.
Side of the table's so quiet.
Potato, potato, I guess, I don't, either way.
All right,
Okay, so we will finalize those changes and then bring that forward to council for approval.
okay. Moving on to or go ahead.
I said thanks.
Oh, gotcha. Moving on to E4, allowing non-residents access to the compost site. So I feel like I've had a lot of conversations here with people telling me they really hate this idea. And the only reason I brought it up was because I had somebody call, they lived out on 47. They wanted to use the compost site. He said he's been using it in the past, and now all of a sudden he can't use it. So he shouldn't have been allowed to use it in the past because it was only for residents. But I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring it up and I'll see if the council's interested in allowing it. And you know, I told him in the meantime, you know, Cambridge Solid Waste, you can go and it's $5 and you can dump up there, but he just liked the convenience of coming to Isani. So anyway, the only way I would be on board with opening it up to residents outside the city limits would be as if there's a fee that we charge for that. And, you know, I know we have guys out there, but we really don't want them handling cash probably out there and dealing with that. And I don't know, I mean, it's kind of a pain to run it through the city, but I mean, if it helps offset some of the costs for our residents, it might be kind of nice, but I don't know how many people are really gonna use
Mayor
it.
and council, let me
Yep.
comment on that a little
Yeah.
bit. So currently, my concern would be space if we allow this for everybody, because we're really tight over there as it is.
Yeah, sure.
There'd be additional brush we'd have to maintain at the end of the year. There are times right now where the compost site is really, really, really busy. And with one attendant trying to keep up with more people coming in. I mean, he's trying to make sure that, right now, he's checking licenses. I'm sure those people have slipped through the cracks. You know, if they just rattle off an address in town and don't show a driver's license, don't have it with me, you know, they can get through. Not very hard if you want to play that route. He does turn people away quite a bit that come that don't live in town. I get phone calls here at City Hall all the time from people out by Green Lake, out by Speck Lake. Can I use the compost site? It's for residents only. So he's there to make sure.
And they're wanting to use it to dump stuff, right? Not to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They just want to come and get rid of their leaves and grass and brush and whatever else. So he's there, the attendant is there really to make sure that, one, you're in town, and two, you're not dumping garbage. So he's got people that like to slip around to the back side of the pile, and he'll jump in and go over there and see what they're dumping, because that's where they like to go and dump their, you know, if they didn't have clean leaves, they'll throw their trash in there and stuff like that. So that's what he's there for. Every year we have it screened out. We gotta screen it for the black dirt to take all that stuff that does slip through the cracks out of there. My concern would just be the additional compost we would get, and could we keep up with it? And I don't think we could.
Yeah.
I agree, seeing how it operates.
I think we need to keep it to our residents.
I agree.
They're gonna start in, like you said, somebody's gonna have old box spring or something, so crumbled up, thrown in the bags, and if it's buried in the bags, and if he's not watching them dump it, next thing you know, you got a box spring sitting out there. I just think it needs to stay to our residents. They're the ones that are paying for this. I don't care if you put a fee on it or not. They're the ones that are paying for it. Their time to go out and do all that. I mean, we've opened it up for the brush and some of this other stuff, making it more convenient for our residents. Let's keep it that way. That's my total opinion.
I mean, my thought was, is if you charged enough to make it worth our while, you'd probably end up just driving to Cambridge anyway, because it would, why would you spend $25, $30 to dump when you can go up there and do it for $5? I mean, it's more hassle, but it's, you're not gonna spend the extra money to dump here, you know what I mean? So, that was kind of my thought, is that I wanted to bring it up, and I'm okay with that decision by you guys, unless somebody else wants to.
I asked a few neighbors at my
wanted
house,
to-
and they said no.
Yeah.
Didn't hear you.
I said I asked a few of my neighbors, and they didn't like the idea of opening it up.
Even if you were charging for it, or you didn't mention that part?
Well, we didn't mention that, but they like
Yeah.
the luxury of being able to go in there and not being packed. Because my dad lives over in North Branch, and some of those times there's a waiting line, and he doesn't
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
I wanted to bring up again, is it possible that we could designate one day a year, either in the spring or in the fall? Maybe the fall would be better, because then we know how much compost we have left over, where people could get larger quantities and pay a fee to have it loaded. So, like, there's years past where we've had a lot of compost at the end of the year, plus what's brewing for the following year. I was wondering if it would be feasible to, like, one Saturday a year where people could come in with pickup, have it filled up with a skid steer, one of the public work guys do it, and charge X amount, $50. And that still would be cheap for dirt. I mean, a pickup load full of dirt, $50 isn't a bad deal. And they would save themselves, you could get rid of some extra compost, or you could allocate some in the springtime, how much you could do on a bulk basis. And there's a lot of older residents in town too that have a hard time going there and shoveling their own dirt. And I know the theory, I think, behind that was so that we wouldn't go through so much, which makes sense too.
I can touch base on that a little bit. Right now, there's a large pile of black dirt out there, and people do load it by hand. But that black dirt can disappear in a heartbeat on a project that Public Works is working on. You know, that,
Okay.
over there, we moved that berm for the Illuminate Isani, that dirt all came from the compost site. And there's other like the salt shed here now, that we're in the process of building. There's a lot of dirt gonna fill in around that too, you know, because the ground has been disturbed and stuff like that around there too. So there's a benefit to the city having that stockpile of dirt. You know, we bring dirt over for residents to come and get it. We've done it a couple times this spring, so that they can get the dirt. Yeah, so it is a benefit for us to have that quantity. And it just all of a sudden, one day, we'll use it all up, you know, and then we gotta wait, or we gotta buy it. Yeah. We use that for all of our yard repairs in the spring that we do from plowing. That dirt is all from the compost site.
I think the sledding hill is made out of compost.
Some of it was. A lot of that was dirt that we just had on site from a project. I don't remember where we got all the dirt, but a lot of that dirt was, well, we used some of the berm was from when the, was dirt that we had on site, and then, you know, that, for the archery range and stuff like that, so that was used there too. So there's a lot of projects that we use that compost on.
Okay. Thought I'd mention it again.
I like the idea. I mean, I think it would be nice to offer something like that, but.
I mean, if we ever came across where we just had a huge amount that we could never use, we could always just make a Facebook post and do something like that, I would think. Matt would be the one to know when that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
If you need the space, you don't think you're gonna need it for the next year or two, or, so I think that's a good idea, up to Matt's discretion, I think.
Did you say you have gone out a couple times and got it, helped people get it and stuff, or?
Have we ran out before?
No, did you say, you said something about kind of going out a couple times and getting it? Like for residents, you were saying, or no?
Oh, we've never loaded it for residents.
okay.
Yep, no. Residents, they bring a bucket, they bring trailers, they shovel it in there. They like it when the pile is bigger, that's easier to shovel it into a trailer when the pile is
right.
taller, so we try to keep it a larger pile for them. Yep. It's been very busy. Like I said, this year, you look at that pile out there, and we've piled it up twice now. Our residents have came and got dirt, so it's
I mean,
a hot
and they can
commodity.
always, it's Bjorklund's over there too, where they can go, or, is it Bjorklund's? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Where they can go, and they'll load it for you, so I
Yep,
mean,
yep. And I think
it's not
Northland's-
extremely expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
Is there a limit? I've had that question twice this year. Is there a limit on how much you can take?
No, I don't, well, yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, we don't let you bring equipment in to load it because it's not really for if you're building a new house to get all your dirt from there. I mean, you want to do it in buckets, I suppose you could in buckets, but, you know, you're not gonna get,
So no equipment, basically.
you're gonna wear your back out, you're gonna try your yard with buckets of dirt, so.
We have been asked in the past to bring equipment in, and it's been a couple landscaping companies, so
Right.
you know, they want that, but that's not the intent of what
Okay.
it was for. It was for residents, maybe setting up a little plot of garden or something like that.
But if somebody had the ambition to fill their whole truck bed by hand, you would let them do it? Okay.
And they do. They do.
Sounds good.
All right, so no action to take on E4 there at this time, but, E5, as-built for new homes.
Mayor, if I could interrupt, I think we should go to the overlay, because I think it could be a lengthy discussion to ensure
Okay.
that we get done before planning commission,
Okay.
if you're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Jerry, you guys okay with that? Sure. Okay. Well, I guess,
So Steffi's going to be bringing forward some ideas that staff went through a lot of different scenarios of what could be possible, keeping in mind things that Jerry had shared and what his hope was for his property.
Okay.
So I think if we let Stephanie take the lead on what she's proposing,
okay.
and then we can go back and forth.
So I can kind of maybe just kind of rehash sort of what, in my mind, what the goal that we're trying to accomplish is trying to make it more flexible for you guys and businesses within that district to just get rid of it and essentially make it, because as far as I understand right now, I mean, you guys are zoned like commercial and you can't, or retail, right? So you're not able to actually expand your business the way it is now, and you're paying probably a higher tax rate than you maybe would otherwise. And we've had businesses, I think Minnesota Equipment even had to come in and get special permission to add on to that other lot kind of behind them, right, a couple of years ago? And then you had Knife River, that was just for parking. Right, but to do that in the 65 overlay wasn't allowed.
It's just because it was not a primary use. It was,
Yeah,
parking and storage is a secondary use, so
Just
that was
in
the
any
real
zoning
issue.
district,
So it
but-
wasn't the,
it wasn't the overlay per
No,
se that allowed, but.
it was just what our ordinance overall
I
says.
gotcha.
So,
But we did have that issue with Knife River having to build a building outside of that, I mean, just silly stuff, so.
I think Strikes too had an issue with it.
Right, so that was maybe something sort of
was
with that parking
similar
issue
with
too.
Okay.
parking, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
but, so the goal is to make it better, so, and more flexible for you guys, and hopefully cheaper to maintain, so.
Okay, so staff considered all of these things and looked at all of our options, which include rezoning everything to industrial, which we discussed the barriers to that, as well as rezoning everything to just be to commercial or just another commercial district, or just removing the overlay district and what that didn't allow. And so after considering all of these different things, we decided the best thing to do is create a new district, which would be the Business Industrial Transitional District. And so that will allow current industrial businesses to expand until, if and when they decide to allow for commercial businesses to be constructed on these parcels. So I haven't worked on the language yet because that'll go through the Planning Commission, but really the thought is we take what we have in the B2 district and allow those items in this district, as well as some of our industrial things that you would like to see that we currently have in the industrial district, but maybe some things we would maybe not want on Highway 65. Like, for instance, storage units and adult use would be a high probability of getting a bunch of those within that district if we put them on Highway 65, and not very high tax favorable things for the city to have on Highway 65. So keeping that stuff maybe out of that district and off of Highway 65. So the pros of this is it promotes future expansion for both industrial and commercial uses located within the corridor, especially those that are already there. Allows for more commercial business uses along the trunk Highway 65 corridor than what is currently allowed in the Highway 65 overlay district due to the underlying zoning district taking over. So the Highway 65 overlay district limited some of those uses, so now it'll be the full use of what is in the B2 district throughout the city. It also allows or limits the introduction of the new industrial business in the main corridor, protecting our most valuable land and tax base. So we're still not gonna allow a bunch of industrial here, right? Where we don't want it, because that will limit that tax base over the years. It's just not as taxed at as high of a rate. So we wanna keep that commercial. As well as allows a gentle transition into neighboring district. So if it's a transitional district, that means that we're not having maybe, we're not allowing, like here, industrial next to housing. So keeping that commercial, which is a better transitional district between the two. Also allows council and planning commission discretion for what types of things in the current industrial district that we allow into this district, so we can be choosy. We know that we have to have a district within the city that allows for adult uses, for instance. And so that's in our industrial district, but if we were to put that on Highway 65, I can guarantee you we will have lots of adult uses on Highway 65, because most cities don't allow that, right? For that reason. And the cons of this are that it does allow some industrial use near future residential districts potentially. But we already have them there, so we're not really allowing, the way we've chosen it here, we're not really allowing more places for those industrial things. People are already living next to them, right? So for instance, Knife River, Isani Ready Mix. So we're just transitioning those. It's kind of hard to see the way they did this. We had Bolton and Menk do this, and they just created, it looks kind of like the overlay district, but it's not. So they removed the overlay district lines from all across here. And they created this hashtag district. And so that would allow business and industrial in those areas. So here and here. And that's really all we changed. And then took off the overlay district. But it really does allow for a lot more growth to happen with what's already existing. They're not a non-conforming use anymore, so they can't have any more growth in those areas. But for instance, in the case of Isani Ready Mix, with having another business wanting to grow there that is similar to his, it still allows for that. So we're not preventing any new industrial uses in those parcels either.
I actually like that plan.
And then
Yeah, I
I'll-
mean, you know me, I mean, I always want to push the limit on
I
what you
know,
could do
but
with
I-
your own property,
you know,
but I mean.
You
I-
remember
yeah.
when the people took over the store, the building?
Yeah,
And that is gonna turn into a nightmare.
yeah, right,
And what she's stating, that wouldn't be allowed there.
right,
And by pushing it in the industrial park, they would push that out back behind, Quick Trip back in that industrial area.
right.
Which, we have to give it to them, but it's
Yeah, I
better
think
than
it's,
having it right on 65.
I think it's a good compromise,
I think it is.
yeah.
And it does allow us to decide, I mean, we can really pick what those industrial uses are that we want, and commercial uses. So if there's something else you want to see expanded, or in that district that you think needs to be there and is missing, we can add whatever you want to this district. And we can change other parcels, like for instance, I know one of the parcels over here, this one, for instance, might be a good transitional thing because it's an industrial building that's being used for commercial, but it could be used for either or. And so we have potential buyers that might be interested in having it rezoned to this district. So, and since it's transitional, it still fits because it's between industrial and commercial. So it actually gives us more options options for other parcels within the city too, not just along Highway 65.
Sure.
None of you were up here when this overlay district started. I was not in favor of doing that to start with. It was basically shoved down our throats.
Well, I think at that time it was basically, they were worried it was gonna be all car dealerships all the way up and down Highway 65 at that time too.
That wasn't the intention.
No?
No. No. We'll just leave it at that. I wasn't ever in favor of making that overlay district and making everything so stringent. That's
I
why I've
never
always
was.
been, that's why I've always said, if they wanna come in and they want a different color scheme to match their business, allow them. That's a business. That's a
Right,
good
I
business.
agree.
Caribou, Dairy Queen, those are all favorable businesses. They're not a problem. You know, the hotel, even, that's another story in itself. Just like the sign deal.
800,000.
It was more than that.
Exactly.
That sign, you know, they did put a nice sign, but it wasn't in conformity with what that overlay was. I think what Stephanie is proposing to me is a very good fit. And I think that meets the Lossie's needs. And I think it will help, it may help bring in other business in some of these open areas that we do have.
Sure.
And it meets their needs for now and in the future. So what he has discussed before, that he knows it could potentially be commercial in the future, and he doesn't want to inhibit that either, so.
Yeah,
It
right.
allows for both.
Right. Yeah. What do you guys think?
No more than that.
It was a 40 and a half deep retail. What good is that land, except to pay taxes on it, at a 40 length, so that 1,200 feet and a half, that'd be 2,000 feet down here to the back, and that'd be retail. Well, of course, you know, there's no retail 2,000 feet off the highway. That's ridiculous, you know. And then another thing was that you're out of compliance. The ready mix would be out of compliance. I would never be able to sell it, you know, as a ready mix because it's not in compliance with the government. 79, Steve remembers, when I started, I never ever thought that the government would be stopping me from ever reselling. That's what you work for, to resell it.
Right.
Well, or pass it on to my son or my grandkids, you know, but I suppose if I pass it on to my son in deed, it'd be out of compliance. I can't even pass it on to my son or my grandkids. And that's the most important part of this whole thing that happened, and it sounds like you're rectifying it.
Is it working? No, to me, it sounds great. It gives us an option to grow our business, and which I'm trying to do a little bit by growing. So possibly in the future, I'm gonna need to put up another building, something that under the old laws, I could never, build a new shop or anything like that, because we are not compliant. So this helps us there, and then also helps us if we ever got offered that another company wanted to buy us, you could sell it as a business, and then this is great for us. Obviously Scott, our renter, has been in here, and he wants to grow his business, and he's either threatening to leave and buy a piece of property in Anoka County to grow his business, or we're trying to come up with a solution, maybe sell him, 10 acres, and then he'll build a new building for himself and grow his business. So I think this is a great all-around scheme for us, obviously, but I think it's for a lot of the businesses up and down 65, and you're probably gonna see some growth from it. I mean, it might not be exactly the coffee shops type growth, but, you're gonna get other businesses. But this is great. It gives us options anyways. We're not, we don't have our hands tied behind our backs this way.
There'll still be restrictions, which I agree with 100%, is car lots. I've been approached many times for people to, I got 5 cars, I want to sell them, that's the start, and I've never let that, well, I'd probably let my cousin sell a car, or I've even sold one, but my point is, I wouldn't never sell to a car lot person or even, because that, to me, it devalues, I shouldn't say that, I guess, in public, but devalues the land.
And that's a conditional use and open sales lot within this, the B2 district. And so if we carry over all of those uses the same, that's something you guys can decide if that's what you want to keep.
Yeah, and I think storage buildings too, I mean, as long,
Yes.
if it's a conditional use and the council at the time can make that decision, then I think that's okay too, I think. I think Steve's right. I mean, it allows for a lot more flexibility, and I think it's a good compromise, you know.
Somebody shouldn't be penalized, building a business, their entire life, and then if they do want to sell it, can't even sell it because it doesn't conform to the use. If that's the way the books are right now, that's not right.
Well, like Luke brought up about like strikes, I argued to allow Strike to do what he needed to do there. Hugo Strike was the mayor of the city of Isani at one time, back when he built that building. And I was told, well, that's because he was the mayor and he could do whatever he wanted. There was never any regulations back then. And like Mr. Lossie says, you build a business and retire to sell that as your retirement. That is your retirement. Because a lot of times, we didn't invest money into a retirement plan. That business was your retirement. So when you sold it, and if you can't sell it for what it is, what are you selling? You're selling a piece of land. Or they got to tear down buildings or whatever. So I always said that from day one on this overlay was it was tying people's hands.
And the government has no right to affect people's future like that. That's the biggest problem with all this zoning stuff, honestly, but.
I mean, we do have to we can't allow certain things, but at that point, if they want to come in and talk about it, we can have that discussion. But, I mean, it's just like the adult stores that Stephanie was talking about. St. Cloud fought those two of them, one on each side of town, for years. They didn't want them there, and it was right on Highway 10. Both of them are. So the people don't want those things there in plain view sight where they go by. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you you can't have that, but I don't think it needs to be brought out and brought to every young person's attention. So by pushing them into the industrial park, they're gonna have to go search for it.
Sure.
So I think what's in my opinion, what she's laid out, Lossies are all in order with it. I think that's what we should move on to the planning commission and allow this change to move forward.
I agree.
And so if I have a good consensus with that, then staff will work on combining the districts and we'll lay out what we've heard you guys say, and we'll go from there with the planning commission, and you guys can add, take away to that new district, and then we'll start the process that direction.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good job on this, I mean, that's,
Yeah, good job, Stephanie.
this has been something I've been it's irritated me for a very long time, and so to get it fixed is,
The amount of times I've heard
So
you
glad
say
you got
something
this
about that
on.
district,
just,
if I could comment.
I mean, every time we'd have somebody come in, that, like you said, I mean, you mentioned, strikes, what did you mention, Dairy Queen and Caribou. I mean, it's like we had a color scheme even in this, like, what do you mean you're gonna tell these businesses what colors they can, I mean, come on, and then you'd make an exception every time that they wanted to do it anyway, so.
And like I said, Lossies have been out there since
Yeah,
1979.
yeah.
It wasn't like they just built this yesterday and did all this behind closed
Yeah.
doors and whatnot. They built this business, they've been a big part of this community for years and years and years. I've known Jerry forever, and he's always been a big part of this community, and I think, Jerry, you were at the Lions at one time, weren't you even? Yep, and the Lions are a huge asset to the city, and, he's donated a lot towards the city, and he's done a lot through the Lions and himself personally. Why are we belittling somebody from being,
Yeah, and why at the time they wouldn't have taken all that into consideration when you had those businesses there?
brought up?
I mean, yeah.
We had
All
a
right.
great mayor at that time.
Yeah,
Well.
this should have been redone for you a long time ago.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of meetings, that's for, when Dave Apex was the mayor. Remember, that was a while ago. And then most of everyone was construction orientated at that time, back in the early 80s. And things were way easier than now.
Yeah.
Or,
Dave Apitz was a great mayor too. He lived across the street from me for 25 years. Yeah,
I like Dave.
yeah. But other mayors have done not so great jobs, so.
All right, well, let's go ahead and, where do you guys want to change, thanks for coming in there, guys, that's.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Yeah. Do you want to move anything around here at all to the next, Okay, all right, okay, gotcha, all right. We were waiting on some other people, so we weren't sure, weren't sure exactly what we got going on. So where are we at? Yeah, back to E5, okay, yep. As-built for new homes.
Good evening. So currently, the city of Isani does not require as-built for grading for new home construction. And as we have this continued growth that we've been having with the new homes, it's becoming more and more evident and recommended by engineers, building officials, that we require these, not only for the protection of the city, for overall stormwater flow and keeping things where it needs to go, but it holds the builders accountable, it holds the residents accountable, and it takes some of the weight off of the city. So the added cost to the builders is roughly $500 to their initial survey that they're required to have done at the beginning of the building process. And so at the end of final grading, what happens is they get a final survey done, and they show us that they graded it as they said they were going to. So we don't have water flowing onto the neighboring parcels in a direction that it shouldn't be. So then we don't have pooling water in places it shouldn't be. And so this is something, as we just continue to grow here, we really recommend requiring, and I laid out exactly what would be included in this, and this was taken from the quite a few other cities. These are what they require for their as-builts. I've spoken to a few builders, not upset about having to do it. They have to do it in other cities. They just like to know they have to do it. So I think the goal would be to implement it with any new building permits moving forward when the permit is pulled after that standpoint, because we don't want to surprise people at the end of their building process that now they need an as-built. So that would be my recommendation. I do think it's for the best of our residents and their neighbors, really, so all of our residents.
I think this is a great idea. I think there's too many contractors out there that get in the practice of saving a dime to make a quarter, you know, and ultimately it's going to come down to the residents in the city. I think we need to protect our residents because business owners are here to make money. Residents and us, the city, are here to survive. So they have too much of an incentive to try and save themselves on grading and all that stuff, and I think this is a good
Well, you know
step.
who's gonna pay the extra $500?
Yeah, well,
It's the new resident that
Yeah.
comes to
There's-
town.
there's
But let me just say, though, I think it probably is a wise idea to have it done. I mean, I've heard horror stories about just water pooling up in people's
And I will
sheds, and I
say,
mean,
the
it's just,
majority of our builders are doing a great job. That's
Yeah.
not the
Right, right,
issue.
right.
It's just to make sure we're all on the same page. When we have a lot of houses going in at the same time, there's a lot of moving parts, and this will just make sure that everybody's
I
on the
think, yeah,
same.
as much as I hate to because that is who really is gonna pay for it. You can say, well, the builder should pay, well, they're not, they're
but
gonna
it
pass that
doesn't stick
along.
someone in a situation where they have to regrade or do,
Yeah,
or they
right.
get water in their basement, you know,
Right.
which is a lot more than $500.
Right, yeah.
The
So
one
I
thing, Mayor
think
and
it's,
Council, I'd like to add on that is there have been numerous cases that have come to me, which is not typical, but that's just the volume that we're doing in building. And when I have the new homeowner contacting me of, can you prove to me that this was graded correctly? It doesn't look right. We don't have anything to give them because we haven't received anything because we're not requiring it. So spending my time, Stephanie's time, engineering's time, we're putting hundreds of dollars out there on the city's time, you know, to try to figure these out for the people, when we could just easily require the as-built after to say, here, the document, we can check the points and good to go, and it's so much faster.
yeah. What were you gonna say, Steve?
I was just gonna say, you to do an as-built for what you're requiring for swales and how everything's done, that's gonna involve a surveyor. because you can't go out and do it any other way. So as-built generally in a construction field is how things are done. Like, I'm just gonna use plumbing for example. I would have to do an as-built plan only on commercial applications, where I may have altered and changed piping from what they originally said, or they wanna know where it's at under the ground. That is what a true as-built is. So, for, storm sewers, I'll be honest with you, the biggest thing that would be great to have on these things is locations of the telephone lines, cable lines, those things, and storm drains. The sewer and water, the sewer, it's generally gonna follow the water, and you're gonna find the curb key outside, and you know where that's gonna be. You can pretty much shoot a straight line from that to where it's going in your house, and you're gonna know where that's at. But those as-bills are that, but to get a true as-built for what they're referring to is going to require surveying. Because
Yep.
they're gonna have to shoot elevations.
Yes, so, and that's typical, and that's where I got this money is, so or the dollar amount from is, usually it's an add-on to the initial survey that they're getting for the parcel. So it's an additional 500 for the grading.
Because an
as-built.
inspector isn't gonna know it until they see
Yeah,
the
3 to 5.
survey marks. They're not gonna know. I mean, you can't just set up a transit and say, okay, that's it. No, that isn't.
Yeah, and it also gives us the ability to then inspect it, so the building inspector will then be able to use that as-built to actually confirm that the grading is as it should be. And we've actually had instances where an as-built would have protected the builder against the homeowner doing something once they moved into the parcel too. So it really is threefold in protecting people within our city, so.
There's, it says it will require landscape finishes, sod, grass, trees. I noticed a lot of new builds where they plant their own grass, or, they have it built in the late fall, and then next spring they plant grass instead of having it sodded right away. I've noticed it in other cities. I've seen a lot of unfinished lawns when people moved in here, and I was assuming
We
that's
do
what they were
require
doing too.
sod. It's just sometimes if it doesn't get in, we require escrow until it's sodded. So it depends on the time of year that a house is built. So, but we do require sodded yards.
At least in the
That's
front
already-
part of the house.
Yes.
The front part, and you can see.
Any
or
disturbed
see through
area.
that.
Any disturbed area,
So that's already a requirement.
yes.
Okay.
We do not require sprinkler systems, but we do require sod.
Right, I know we require trees, I was just wondering about the sod. Okay. That was my only concern.
So if there's a consensus, then I'll bring this forward also at a later date with the changes that you've seen suggested, but we'll tidy that up.
Sounds good. Moving on to E6, requiring updated surveys for new fences.
We have a lot of new fences going in, so that's where this came from. And even though we do have a lot of new homes, so we have some updated surveys, we have a lot of homes that have changed the hands of owners, and we don't have updated surveys at all. And so what we really need is to prove that fences are where they say they're going to be. We've had a lot of issues with property owners battling each other because the fences are not going in. And so that is where this comes from. And so we would like, I added the verbiage in here for all permits for fences and walls to be constructed, or for it to require within 5 feet of the property line. We do have some fences that people will build just around the back of their house for their dog. So in those instances, I don't really need to know where the property line is. We can see that you're far away from it. And so in those instances, I'm not recommending that we require an updated survey. But for any that are on the property line or within that 5-foot boundary, which is a drainage and utility easement, we really need to know. We have had some fences that have been constructed on city infrastructure, which can damage storm pipes because they're so close to the ground, the top of the ground. Been a long day. Surface, there we go. So close to the surface that they hit the pipe and it could damage it, which is a cost for them, but also a cost for the city and can cause major issues. And so this really prevents all of that from happening. We spend a lot of staff time dealing with fence issues.
What do you think the average cost of a survey is for these homeowners?
It can be anywhere from a few I would say $800 to $1,200 for a city lot.
Would the city be satisfied?
They do not have to do the whole lot. If they're just doing a fence on one side, it would be that line. So it really depends on what they're doing. So I can't, and every lot is so different, so.
Generally, in the city, the lots are gonna be, they probably aren't gonna be that expensive to survey, because there's too many survey points that they can come off of easier.
And a lot of them are
Usually they
new
have pins.
surveys.
And if they have the corner pins still, which a lot do, you just need that, they need to locate those and those go faster. Ones that don't have the locate pins, those take a little bit more time and then take possibly even some research on the surveyor's end. But most time we see that they have their corner pins. But the city doesn't go out, staff doesn't go out and verify corner pins, so I think that in those instances, their surveys are less money.
Well, and a surveyor can verify that the corner pins are in the right location, whereas city staff cannot. And it's very possible for any property owner to move a corner pin. So we just, trusting the survey is the best.
I mean, we know on our, it's GIS, right, that has all of our city infrastructure. I mean, we know fairly close to where it's gonna be, right? I mean, may not be within 6 inches, but I mean, we'll know within a few feet of where we're at, right?
Yes,
I mean,
usually.
Would it be
If we have
fair?
correct as-built from the developments.
well, going forward, all of the new properties, you'd have those as-built, and so you should have accurate data then
Correct.
for all the new
It'll help.
properties, right? So this wouldn't be a problem that would continue to be a problem, it would just be on the old properties, but, I don't know, I have a real problem adding that kind of cost to putting a fence in, you know?
So
I
do
have a
I.
compromise I was gonna ask, minimum I would like to see is, if somebody wants to put a fence up, if they have a notarized letter from each property owner around them saying, yeah, I'm fine where that fence goes, no problem, that would save them a lot of money in survey costs. I mean, that's
We
probably
did
half
that
of
we
their
did that
fence.
years and years ago with one of my neighbors, and we just
Right.
got a letter, and I don't know if that's.
That is what they
that's
do
changed.
now,
And
is you
so
have
we
to, if
do
you're gonna put it
require
on the
that.
line.
If you're within 1 foot of the property line, you are required to get your neighbor's permission. But we do have people who go in, think they're building it 1 foot away from the property line or more, and they are not doing that because they do not know the location of their property line, or they think their property line is what they've been mowing for the last 3 years, but it isn't, and their neighbor then calls them out and says, that is not your property line, I think it's here, and so
Funny
then
how the
we're,
neighbor never calls you out when you're mowing their grass.
Or then,
Put a fence where they don't
it's an
want it.
example,
so
but.
we do have one of them that's like that they're both disputing that the fence is on there, so then we have to, the staff has a difficult time, our hands are tied until someone pays for the survey. And who pays for the survey then? Then there's a dispute against that.
Split the
If they're not working together to do the fence, they probably aren't working together to pay for the survey because they're only surveying one property line. In other instances, we have that if the property owner who gave a permission to put it on the line moved and you have a new property and owner and the person with the fence there isn't allowed to have it there because the new property owner doesn't agree to, there become these issues.
They want to repair it, that's what we've had.
Yeah,
And
the
they're not
repair.
letting them repair the fence, so we have lots of issues you don't think of.
Well, but a
until we
survey
have an
wouldn't
issue.
solve those issues as far as I mean, it would tell you where the line is, but I mean, if it's already on the line and you had the property change hands and now they want to repair it, well, they wouldn't solve that problem that you're mentioning there, right? So,
Not that one, I guess.
yeah,
I guess.
that's just a lot of cost to,
I think you let the neighbors talk it out. That's what we did with ours.
We do that first, and then they come to us, and our hands do become involved with it. We used to really say it's a civil matter.
It
We
is.
don't get involved. However, when we reached out to our city attorney, and really it does push back on the city because we have an ordinance that says that you need to get permission from your neighbor. And if they didn't get permission because they thought they were the foot off, it becomes the city has to get involved. We're writing letters, we have to give notices, and we have to give them deadlines. If not, I mean, it can go all the way up to the court system of offense. So that's what we're dealing with right now, and it does take an incredible amount of time.
So what if we ditch the ordinance?
That's what I was gonna say.
There
Well,
are
but how do you-
cities, LA
Not ditch
well,
it,
go
but
ahead, yeah.
They are considering it right now, from my understanding, because they are having issues on the other end because they are not They have regulating it, so they have city infrastructure that's been impacted. So the only thing that, I mean, to be honest, we really want to protect is our infrastructure that we have going in so that we're not.
Yeah, I mean,
that's-
I think it's fair if you have infrastructure that we know is there on that line, that, yeah, they should have to pay for the survey, and they're just, unfortunately, that's the situation that they're in, right? But,
There's gonna be a lot more people building fences without pulling a permit or doing the proper steps if they have to pay $1,000 for a survey.
yeah,
And
so I mean,
that's-
I don't have,
that's what you're
I
gonna-
don't have a problem with that. If we
Yeah.
wanna, if we say, okay, well, when they come in for the fence permit, well, there is infrastructure that runs through here, so unfortunately, you have to pay for a survey to make sure you're not gonna, at least on that section, you know, that you're
Wouldn't
not
that
gonna
just be a
damage it,
locate?
but. Well, I don't know, can we just,
Wouldn't that just be a locate like we did for the one that we had last week? Where
They
just have
all
to-
are required to do locates for Gopher One.
And that would cover the storm,
regardless.
our infrastructure, wouldn't it?
I mean,
Well, we do go and locate
Yeah.
with the Gopher One call. We do locate the storm pipe, but, I mean, well, Matt, you can talk more.
We gotta locate, we go out there and locate the storm pipe. If there's a water line that goes through the yard, or if there's a sewer line that goes to the backyard, it all gets marked to the best of our ability. So if there's a manhole to a manhole, gate valve to a gate valve, real easy to mark those ones. A storm sewer, you, a lot of times have a grate in the backyard that goes into the storm pond in your backyard. We gotta maintain that grate back there. If something gets plugged or something like that, we gotta maintain that, so it's nice for us to have access to it, but you can go from a catch basin to where that drain is and mark it. Are we always perfect? We're pretty close.
So you wouldn't necessarily need a survey, you just need a locate on the infrastructure that we have. So these residents shouldn't have to do a boundary line survey if we can locate our own infrastructure, then they just know they can't build within a foot of it. Isn't it within a foot, or what's the standard, is it a foot?
It's 5 feet off.
5
of-
feet?
It's
Okay.
actually 5 feet, but we allowed sometimes,
the
as you
one
know,
last
to
week.
go closer.
Okay,
Um,
so they wouldn't need a survey to avoid our infrastructure, that's the Public Works would go out there and locate, and then
It's if they wanted to put it on the line, though.
the property
Or
line,
they want to
right?
put 1 foot off the line so they don't have to get the neighbor's permission. Where's to say that 1 foot is? That's the disputes we're having. If they're like, hey, I didn't need to get your permission because I'm a foot off, and there's like, nope, you're on the line.
or you're over the line. Right now, we have one that is assuming they're over the line.
So we would,
So regardless
Well,
of the
so would
infrastructure,
everyone have to have a survey? That's my question. Would everyone have to have a survey
if they
with
wanted
this?
to put it on the line or within a foot of the line,
I mean, why can't we just say, if we locate the infrastructure, and if the neighbors agree, then, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean,
I think it's good the
if
way
they
it is
don't agree,
personally.
though, I think is the.
if they don't agree, then I think you
Then they
say,
have to
then you
pay for
have
the
to have a survey.
That's
you know
what we
I
were
mean?
told, 10 years ago, we'd have to pay to have it surveyed, and then you're out that expense if you want to put the fence in. That's fair, but to require everyone to do it, I think is silly.
I say we leave it alone.
I think we
I mean,
should. do that
but
too.
I guess even if you're gonna, you wanna just leave it alone? Even if you're gonna require a survey to put it within, if the neighbor doesn't give you permission, and then you say, well, you have to have a survey then to know where the line is, well, that doesn't necessarily mean, just because the neighbor doesn't want it on the line, doesn't mean that they don't have a problem with it being off the line, right? So,
Well,
or
you
you're
could-
saying, or within,
You could think you're being a foot off the line, but you're not.
right.
That's the issue we're having.
But if the neighbor thinks you're a foot off the line, and they're okay with it.
Well, if they're okay
they're
with
not
it, they've signed the
I guess they
form.
would sign the form, yeah. Yeah. Wayne, did you?
But I, it's none of my business, but in listening to what they're saying, that the attorney is telling them that the responsibility is being thrown back to them.
I don't see how.
Maybe then the original law or original rules should be changed. That's a civil matter.
Mhm.
And before I dig anything, I call Gopher One call. I know, 'cause I hit a damn fiber optic.
Ooh.
I know better. But, you know, then that maybe put those warnings on. And I'm sorry, I just, we're over-regulating everything.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think I would.
If we did not, to his point, if we did not require the signature from your neighbor to be on the line, and then just whoever got there first, then it wouldn't be to us. It is because we're requiring that property owner to get their neighbor's signature But then, so then if the neighbor put it on the line or over the line, but we said, well, you gotta work it out with your neighbor, then it would take it off the city's plate.
Well, that sounds good to
Yeah,
me.
I think that would be,
good to
I
me.
think if we're gonna do that anyway, then, I don't know what I wanna say. I think we should go back to our real reason why we're doing fence permits then in the first place, which is really just to protect our infrastructure, and maybe that's the only thing we check, is, hey, yes, you're not building it on city infrastructure, your fence is approved, and we don't care about any of the other things, except for that it's the correct material, so we can't have barbed wire and stuff like that.
I agree with that.
Is that gonna really make your job easier or harder?
Well, I think that it will make it where most residents, in my experience, don't like to hear that it's a civil matter and we won't help you. I mean, not that we say it that way, but people get frustrated by that. They want the city to help them fix the problem with their neighbor.
More often than you think about a lot of things. And so fences specifically is one where they rely on the city to help them.
I mean, if you're putting it on the line, I mean, the line is just as much mine as it is yours. So I mean, that's hard to say that we shouldn't have some
mean,
kind of permission given, right? But
I know we need to move on, and we can continue this perhaps after Plan Commission, but the
Yeah,
other
so
thing to
I-
consider is if we tell everyone, if the rules just state you have to be a foot off the property line, and if you work with your neighbor to connect a fence, so then someone gets an extra 2 feet, instead of mowing that weird strip in between that nobody wants to mow 2 feet strip, then we let them just work it out, and whoever wants to be the one to put up the fence and connect the fence, that is all on them. As long as it's, I mean, aside from infrastructure,
so we just say it has to be
a foot off the line.
foot off the line unless you and your neighbor work something else.
You gotta do whatever you- yeah.
alternatively. Yeah.
Yep.
And then, or if there's city infrastructure, then it has to be,
It has to be reviewed by us
reviewed by us.
with a permit.
I agree with that.
So we still do
Yeah.
fence permit, but we just don't we just take the language out about the property line itself and
Correct.
leave that up to amongst themselves.
I mean, we still would have the language in there that it needs to be on your property, which, right, would stay, which we already have, but saying if you want to build on a property line, just say it has to be within your property at least 1 foot, unless other arrangements.
Yeah, something like that.
It's just
So
hard,
that
because if
way
you get a fence
yeah.
that is decided 2 neighbors want a fence in their yards,
Mm-hmm.
and both of those neighbors move, that's when we have some issues coming forward, is
But
the
they see
people
the
who weren't under that agreement. And so if we have the agreement, we haven't always been regulating fences, right? So once we started, it's actually nice to have that information so we know who put up the fence. Because we have people also arguing, well, I put up the fence. No, the people who lived in my house said they put up the fence. And so, I mean, it is nice to have some background for them, like, well, it did look like they pulled the permit. I don't know, just thinking about stuff like that long-term.
But you see the fence when you buy the property. I mean, it's not like underground infrastructure you can't see. And when you buy a house, you see the fence. So
Right, but
I
if
don't know
it's-
how anybody could argue that fact.
But if it's on the property line and two neighbors got together and built their fences all together around their yards and one in the middle, you can't tell whose fence that is. We have some like that within the city,
Well,
so.
why don't we,
Anyway.
if I can get a motion to kind of recess this until after the planning or after the city council meeting coming up.
Motion to recess.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0.